Under the city sky ablaze with lights, shocking news sent the entire nation into a panic. The identity of the notorious swindler who had deceived millions was finally exposed. But this wasn't just a story about a 100 billion won scam. It was also the strange, dark, and surprising journey of a child prodigy in the world of professional con artists. From a boy with no family, he gradually became the center of an elite scam syndicate. From that day on, the boy was completely immersed in the deceitful schemes orchestrated by his fathers. Every operation they carried out never failed succeeding to a frightening degree. Gradually, the boy wasn't just an executor, but also became the planner of sophisticated scams. A thrill arose as he watched person after person fall into meticulously prepared traps of lies. It seemed the whole world was in the palm of his hand. By then, he was no longer just a family member, but an indispensable link in that scamming network. Breaking news flashed on electronic screens in the streets, stunning the public. In a live broadcast, it was announced that the identity of the swindler who had thrown the entire nation into turmoil had now been revealed thanks to an anonymous source. The live report detailed how the swindler executed a 100 billion won scam, severely affecting 30% of the population. The scale of the fraud reached an unimaginable 100 billion won. But that wasn't all. Further investigations showed the swindler had participated in many other fraudulent activities since a very young age. Currently, the suspect is still on the run while police are in hot pursuit. He merely smirked annoyed, not bothering to hide well. Identified as a 35-year-old man with no birth registration, the police were still unsure if the name he used was his real one. Finally, the authorities announced the culprit's identity as Li Huan, 35 years old, simultaneously displaying his portrait across all media. Li Huan, watching the news, frowned in annoyance and muttered, "Why did they have to pick that damn photo?" Looking at the moonlight outside the window, he sighed, accepting reality as the manhunt intensified. He quietly retreated into his luxurious room and decided to rest. The story rewinds 30 years. A young boy was being sternly questioned by an adult. "Did you take it?" In a large room, the child looked up at the person opposite him and whispered, "I don't know, sir." With tears welling in his eyes, the boy mumbled, "I really didn't see anything." Nearby, a man in a suit scratched his head in confusion, muttering, "Where on earth did it disappear to?" His expression grew worried, and he quietly planned to retreat before drawing attention. The scene shifts to a high-end daycare center that only accepted children from prestigious chaebol families. At a social gathering, the same man from before walked around muttering, "I don't even have a wife or kids. Why am I here?" Then his eyes lit up as he remembered his true purpose. Suddenly, he bumped into a woman. She gasped as the wine glass in her hand shook red wine splashing from the rim. Taking advantage of that moment, he skillfully slipped the ring off her finger with a fleeting touch of his hand. He quickly apologized. "Are you all right?" The woman smiled. Luckily, the wine didn't spill much. Still feigning concern, he excused himself. "I was in a hurry." She gently reassured him. "It's okay, it's crowded." As he walked away, he smirked, looking at the ring in his hand. Piece of cake, he thought, holding the ring. Good time to head back. But unexpectedly, the ring slipped from his hand. "Ah!" he quietly exclaimed as he saw the ring fall. He frantically lunged after it as it rolled across the polished stone floor, and then his gaze landed on the boy from earlier. The ring lay right in front of the boy's feet. The boy burst into tears, sobbing, "I didn't take it, I swear!" The man was momentarily flustered, sensing the boy was genuinely innocent. Knowing the crying would attract trouble, he quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, it was a misunderstanding." As he hastily turned to leave, he still wondered, "Damn it, where did the ring go?" A woman approached the child, bent down, and gently asked, "Who are you, dear? Why are you crying here? Your home isn't here." Hearing this, the man's face turned pale, stunned. He thought, what did she just say? He stammered and stepped forward. The woman tilted her head and asked directly, "Are you this child's father?" He was speechless. "I'm not his father," he screamed internally. But knowing that denying it would expose his trespassing, he weakly countered, My child is somewhere in here," silently cursing, "What the hell is this?" And just then the boy shouted, "Daddy!" He ran and hugged the man's suit jacket tightly, stunning him. "Huh?" The child sobbed. "Don't leave me behind." Tears streamed down his face as he cried, "I'm sorry, I won't ask for toys anymore." The man was silently desperate. "Why am I your dad?" People around began to whisper, wondering if he had really abandoned his child or was just an imposter who had snuck into the high-end daycare. Someone whispered, "No way." Forcing a smile, he hugged the boy and said with a fake laugh, "Son, Dad told you I wasn't leaving." Then he added, "If you like anything, of course, Dad will buy it for you." He whispered, "Let's go." The scene shifts to a narrow alley, the late afternoon sun casting vibrant orange hues through the walls. Stopping in a deserted corner, the man put the child down, panting, and growled, "Who are you?" The boy looked at him with innocent yet puzzled eyes. "What do you mean, mister?" The man angrily asked, "Why did you say I was your father?" The child replied softly, "You said it yourself." The man was completely stunned, stammering, "When did I?" He looked at the small boy standing there, his gaze calm as if nothing had happened. The boy, his bright eyes fixed on the man, calmly stated, "You lied, mister." The man stood frozen, speechless. A bead of sweat trickled down his cheek as the boy continued, "I saw everything." Standing in the dim alley, the boy tilted his head. "Is the game over now?" he asked. "The game between you and me, I mean." The man could only echo, "Game, yes." With a brilliant, radiant smile, the child exclaimed, "That was fun." A cold bead of sweat still clung to the man's temple. "A game, huh?" he murmured, then asked, "Where's your home, your parents?" The boy looked up, his eyes shimmering, and answered softly, "I don't have any." Then he surprisingly countered, "Don't you also have no home just like me?" This stunned the man. "No home? Then where do you live?" The boy gestured vaguely and explained, "I just go anywhere and do what I did earlier." An image of children being picked up from daycare flashed as an illustration. He clarified, "As long as someone else's parents come to pick them up, no one really notices." He added, "Nobody cares as long as they think someone is coming for you." The boy suddenly seemed to remember something. "Ah, that's right," he chirped, then proudly pulled the stolen ring from his pocket, declaring, "I win." The man stared at the ring, his expression unreadable but clearly intensely focused. A close-up on the man's eye showed it widening in shock as he stammered, This is..." Gazing at the sparkling gem on the boy's small hand, he exclaimed, "My ring, holding the retrieved ring." The swindler looked at the child, who was waiting with eager eyes. "I won, right?" A flashback played the boy crying and denying any wrongdoing, making the man recall how just moments ago the child had claimed to know nothing. He thought about the boy's actions, how he'd pretended to be a kindergartner and snuck in. Then the truth hit him. This kid, he even outsmarted me, the renowned Go-in-Nam. The boy smiled, a pale yet luminous smile, holding out the ring. Meanwhile, Go-in-Nam thought, this kid can't be more than 5 or 6 years old. A cold sweat trickled down his temple as he looked at the child with utter bewilderment, silently wondering, who on earth is he? The boy stood there, his tiny hand offering the ring innocently, his azure eyes looking up with a childlike gaze. A close-angle shot revealed a chillingly sharp and perceptive glint in the boy's eyes. Then he posed a chilling question. "You're scared of me too, aren't you?" This made the man's eyes widen in astonishment. He covered his mouth, thinking, what kind of expression did I just show? Scared, he thought again. Why would I be scared of a 5-year-old kid? Yet the sweat continued to drip. Facing the small child before him, the man had to admit to himself, his gaze bewildered. I really am scared of this kid. He also had to acknowledge deep down that this child possessed a true talent. While the boy looked down, a thoughtful expression on his face, a close-up showed the man's lips parting slightly, preparing to make an offer. He extended his hand, palm open, towards the boy standing in the alley, the setting sun at his back. Do you want to come with me? The boy's brilliant blue eyes widened slightly at the unexpected question. The man's hand gently took the boy's tiny one, and the boy said, "Thank you." Because of that day, he continued blushing a little. I got a family. The man and the boy walked away, hand in hand, a new bond forming. The boy remembered that man, Go-in-nam, as his first father. A faint smile had played on Go-in-nam's lips back then. However, the boy's narration revealed something crucial he didn't know at the time. A creaking sound and an ominous voiceover hinted that besides Go-in-nam, something else was true. As the boy looked up at a large figure flanked by 2 others, the truth was revealed: he actually had 3 fathers. In another scene, a different young boy was crying and pleading, "Mister, please help me. My mom and my little brother are in danger." Back to the first boy. He was eating with Go-in-nam and another man. His eyes glued to the TV screen, curiously asking, "What are they doing?" Go-in-nam replied, "Ah, it's like that game you enjoy. They're playing that." Go-in-nam reassured the crying boy from the other scene, patting his head and saying, "It's all fake, just trust me." The boy sobbed, "Will you really help me?" The first boy, our protagonist, stared wide-eyed at the long-haired man sitting opposite him at the table. The long-haired man looked back intently. The long-haired man, likely Kim Tae-shik, asked him, "Do you want to try doing that?" Surprised, the boy asked back, "Really?" The other man nodded. "If you're part of the family, you absolutely can." The boy excitedly raised his fist, shouting, "I want to do it!" He added confidently, "I'll be good at it too." Go-in-nam, however, frowned slightly. "Wait a minute about that." A close-up on the child's azure eyes, sparkling with determination and anticipation. The scene shifts to the second boy standing under a dim streetlight in the dead of night, calling out, "Mister?" He looked up at an indistinct figure, his voice full of anxiety. "My mom." Tears streamed down his cheeks. His hands clasped together, begging, "Please help me, my mom and my little brother." Later, the same boy, his face beaming, fanned out a stack of money, boasting, "I did great, didn't I? That man gave me this too." He held the money forward, proudly stating, "He totally fell for it." The long-haired man stared, his eyes as sharp as knives, as the boy eagerly asked, "When's the next job? What role will I play this time?" A chilling close-up captured the long-haired man's dangerously sly smirk. From that day forward, the boy was completely immersed in the deceitful schemes orchestrated by his fathers. Every operation they undertook was flawlessly successful to an almost frightening extent. Gradually, the boy evolved from merely an executor to the mastermind behind increasingly elaborate cons. A thrilling sensation surged within him as he watched one victim after another fall for his meticulously crafted lies. It felt as if the entire world lay comfortably in the palm of his hand. By then, he was no longer just a member of their family, but had become an indispensable cog in their fraudulent machine. Suddenly, an angry shout echoed through the room. "Damn it!" Han Junu, now grown angrily, questioned one of his fathers. "I told you not to touch that case. Why didn't you listen?" The long-haired man retorted defensively. "It was 100 billion. 100 billion. How could I pass that up, huh? I didn't think things would go this far." Go-in-nam turned to Junu, his face tense, pleading. "Junu, isn't there any other way? You're the smart one, right?" Han Junu exhaled in dismay upon hearing the reply. "There's nothing left. Just give up." He brought a hand to his forehead in despair, realizing everything had come to an end. The long-haired man grabbed Junwoo, his voice urgent. "Is there a way? Is there?" Then he yelled, "Let's just run. If we get caught this time, we're really done for. Go." In-nam continued to plead, "Junwoo, please, you're our son. Save your dads." Amidst scattered pill bottles, another voice chimed in. "You think this is over? If we go down, everyone goes down, damn it." In-nam placed a hand on Junwoo's shoulder, gently reassuring him. "Don't worry too much, Junwoo." He managed to smile and added, "Maybe it's time for us to retire anyway." Junwoo bowed his head, his trembling hand on In-nam's shoulder, his heart heavy. "Dad." A close-up showed Han Junwoo's brilliant blue eyes. His gaze had changed now, filled with a new resolve. That gaze sharpened as he thought, if I get caught, so be it. Maybe it's for the best. He was utterly sick of conning people. As the image of a prison under a gray, rainy sky appeared, Junwoo reflected on the past, how he'd stumbled onto this path without truly understanding what he was doing. He only knew that over time, a single emotion had welled up, the sole emotion now reflected in his mournful eyes as he looked at the detention center: regret. Even so, he still considered regret a useless emotion. The shot lingered on the tightly shut window of a prison cell, dim light filtering into the dark, cramped space. He confessed, "I'm so tired of this." Tired of his fathers, blinded by greed. Curled up in the dark cell, he recalled a life of constantly running. With a haggard face, he sighed, "Yeah, this is the end." His eyes closed, resignation clear on his weary face. Suddenly, his blue eyes snapped open at an urgent call. "Son!" A man's face appeared contorted from shouting eyes filled with desperation. Someone's hand grabbed Junwoo's collar, yanking him violently. He jolted awake now, sitting on a chair, his blue eyes wide with shock, muttering, "What the hell?" In front of him was a golden, crispy piece of chicken, seemingly the cause of all the commotion. "Go." In-nam was on the floor, protectively clutching a chicken drumstick, while another father tried to pull him back, yelling, "Dad, you're doing it again!" Junwoo's eyelids twitched. He faintly uttered, "Huh." Both. In-nam and the other man burst out laughing. In-nam said cheerfully, "At least I managed to protect the drumstick." Meanwhile, Junwoo thought, "Dad." Junwoo sat still, his expression impassive. In-nam smiled. "Eat up, son. You're about to enter high school. Eat a lot while you still can." Junwoo was puzzled. "Huh. What do you mean?" Then, as if something clicked, he looked up. His hand raised in confusion. "I'm about to enter high school." On a whiteboard was the next plan targeting the principal of Gongin Middle School. A fake contract, and Junwoo was to approach him after the group disguised themselves as gangsters. The long-haired man stood by the whiteboard, detailing each step of the plan. Han Junwoo sat at a table, arms crossed, listening intently to what was being laid out. He remained silent, his gaze thoughtful as he absorbed all the information. One of the fathers pointed to the board, excitedly exclaiming, "Han Junwoo, are you listening?" Junwoo was still lost in thought. Gongin Middle School. That's the target this time. He remembered the principal. Could it be that incident from 20 years ago? The plan was for Junwoo to accompany the principal to a hotel in Incheon, pretending that the son of a contract partner attended the school, which would help build trust. Then they would lure the principal into signing the fake contract Junwoo had prepared. After that, the group would move to a VIP gathering spot where Jong Gun-woo and Park Hyung-sik, disguised as gangsters, would be waiting. This would scare the principal into wanting to cancel the contract, as he wouldn't want to be exposed for having connections with gangsters. They would then demand money from him to break the contract. The father finished explaining and turned to Junwoo and the others. "So that's the plan, right?" Junwoo stood up. In-nam was surprised, silently praising his son's cunning. Meanwhile, another father scolded Junwoo, "You little brat, that's the plan." "What's with that tone kid?" that man said, implying Junwoo didn't have a major role and would take a backseat initially. Another man commented, "I thought Junwoo was just going through puberty acting weird." The long-haired man asked, "Hey, don't you know your own son?" The long-haired man's sharp gaze fell on Junwoo, implying that as soon as Junwoo saw an opportunity, he'd pounce like a wild animal. Someone at the table asked, "Come to think of it, how did that old matter turn out? Did you catch them?" Another replied, "That was a long time ago." From behind a slightly ajar door, Junwoo quietly listened to their conversation. The door creaked softly as Junwoo continued to eavesdrop on the men inside. In the bathroom, water flowed from the tap into the sink. Junwoo stood before the bathroom mirror, the truth dawning on him with slowly mounting horror. It's just as I thought. What I heard. It's also something we did in the past. I've been thinking about it constantly these past few days. A clear realization struck him as the words, "I've returned to the past," echoed in his mind. Looking at his younger self's reflection, he gradually accepted the unbelievable truth. 35 years of life, and now he was back to being a high school student. Junwoo acknowledged that both his previous life and his current one were real, and because he had returned to the past, he determined he couldn't live the same old life again. But immediately, a new problem arose. The long-haired man entered the bathroom calling out, "Han Junwoo!" He handed Junwoo a document explaining it was the work schedule for the next week as Junwoo took it. The man said, "This is a crucial mission and I believe Junwoo can handle it on his own." Then he added gravely, "It's also very dangerous." Junwoo's eyes focused intently as the man emphasized, "This is a more important mission. Furthermore," he continued, "it's very dangerous. Be extremely careful." With an ice-cold gaze, the man asserted, "None of the jobs we do are without danger." Junwoo observed, silently thinking as expected of Jong Gun-woo. He remembered that Jong Gun-woo always prepared an escape route if things didn't go smoothly. Seeing the plan, which included a boat near Chunsan-pu port for Jong Gun-woo and others, Junwoo mentally listed Kim Kwang-chul and Go In-nam, all tough guys, and thought, but I'm not. Junwoo calmly reviewed the document Jong Gun-woo had given him in the bathroom. Jong Gun-woo looked at him knowingly and asked, "Are you scared now?" Junwoo replied with a faint smile as if he were still fine. He thought, "This time it's just because the school principal is involved, so I have to go to school." An image of the principal appeared on the whiteboard. Jong Gun-woo warned, "Don't show your face on the streets too much. Don't make unnecessary friends." Standing by the bathroom door, Jong Gun-woo emphasized one last time, "Remember, we're the only ones who will take you in." Junwoo recalled his previous life, how he had directed countless operations to perfection. He continued, "No operation failed under my hand." An image showed him holding a mask against a backdrop of successful deceptions. If anything failed, the narration concluded it was because of the father's desires. An image of Jang Gun-woo seemingly manipulating Junwoo, who thought they brainwashed me for their own benefit. Junwoo mused, "Maybe this is why they don't want me exposed, seeing me only as a source of money." A flashback showed a very young Junwoo sitting alone in a dark room watching TV. He realized they were also afraid he had other intentions and wanted to escape. But Junwoo remembered one person who truly cared. Go In-nam had once told him he didn't have to walk this path and could quit anytime. In his memory, a young, angry Junwoo clutched Go In-nam's jacket, asking, "I said I don't want to. Why do you keep saying that?" He continued, "I like this work. Why don't you let me do what I want? Go." In-nam looked at him sadly. Young Junwoo cried, "Do you hate me, Dad?" While Go In-nam bowed his head sorrowfully. The adult Junwoo, detaching from Go In-nam in a white void, narrated, "Back then I didn't understand." Looking at Go In-nam's distant figure, he now understood Dad said that to protect me. In a cafe, Go-in-nam suggested to Junwoo that there were many other paths in life, like being an office worker or a consultant relying on his son's eloquence. Go-in-nam then excitedly proposed, "That's right, how about trying acting? You like acting, don't you?" He smiled brightly. Junwoo smiled faintly, thinking that's true. I've never thought about it before. "Go!" In-nam called out, "Son," as Junwoo stood at the bathroom door holding the paper and anchovy broth simmering nearby. Seeing Junwoo's demeanor, Go-in-nam asked cheerfully, "You seem down. Want to go eat some meat?" Beside the simmering anchovy broth, Go-in-nam laughed heartily. "You finally understand the appeal of anchovy broth," he said to Junwoo, who was sitting opposite him at the dining table. "You used to hate this dish." Junwoo bowed his head thoughtfully, his deep blue eyes looking down at the table. Go-in-nam gently put down his chopsticks and spoon, urging, "Go on, son. Is there something you want to say?" A close-up of Junwoo's jaw and the collar of his school uniform as he seriously considered his father's words. Junwoo called out, "Dad," and Go-in-nam replied, "Yes." With a serious expression, Junwoo declared, "I'm going to die." At a large area resembling an airport or a station, a drill instructor shouted, demanding all students line up in 3 rows, specifically calling out, "Second years assemble. Where are the third years, huh?" Students milled about, chaotically holding training batons, their faces annoyed. The instructor muttered, "Tisk, the first day of the field trip and this is the weather." His face contorted due to the gloomy rain pouring down. Still holding his baton, he turned and called out, "Han Junwoo, aren't you going to join the group?" Seeing him standing alone away from the other students. Junwoo turned his head, his face slightly brightened, and replied, "Yes, sir, I'm coming." Bah. The instructor, now face-to-face with Junwoo, who was looking down at his phone, asked, "Are all the second years present?" Then he reminded them, "Remember, once we arrive, you still have to listen to your supervising teachers." A close-up of Junwoo's phone screen displayed a message from his father. "Take care of yourself. Have a fun trip." Junwoo looked down at the screen with a faint smile, his expression momentarily thoughtful. The instructor urged, Come on. It's time to get on the bus." And he also said that when we arrive, we'll still be divided into 3 rows just like now. A bus appeared parked on the road near the airport station. Heavy rain poured down. A complex situated by the water created a gloomy and somber atmosphere. Inside, a simple door with a digital lock appeared, implying this was a private or restricted area. A man sat on a sofa, scratching his head and muttering, "Seriously, these students are trouble every time they come." He sighed. But... He leaned down to look into a cardboard box, a calculating smile on his face. "This is the part that makes it worthwhile for me." Inside the box were several bottles of alcohol, making him smirk. Ha! They barely know how to drink, and they're already asking for the top-shelf stuff. He chuckled sinisterly and mumbled, "Should I drink with Teacher Yoi today? Or maybe Teacher Hyeon-soo, since it's been a while?" Suddenly, a loud noise from the door made him jump and whirl around as a figure appeared in the doorway. He looked up, sweat beading on his temple, a look of confusion on his face. Han Junwoo stood there, his eyes annoyed, and let out an exasperated remark. "Damn it, this is seriously annoying." He then angrily asked, "Who the hell are you barging in here?" The man flushed, Bakan pointed at Junwoo and stammered, You. But Junwoo gave a dismissive laugh. "You dare use you in front of a teacher? Your homeroom teacher already told you to get lost, didn't he?" Han Junwoo growled, his face furious. "I don't want to sleep with the other students. I just came in here to take a nap." Angered by the disrespectful attitude, the man advanced, shouting, "What did you just say? What's your name? What class are you in?" He grabbed Junwoo's collar, threatening, "You want me to call your homeroom teacher to teach you a lesson?" Junwoo just smirked. Ha. A close-up of the man's face showed him gritting his teeth in anger, his eyes filled with hatred. "You bastard!" he yelled, then shoved Junwoo hard, making him fall to the floor. Junwoo's name tag flew off. That year, an enraged Junwoo thought, "You dare touch me with your filthy hands!" The man froze slightly, looking down while Junwoo calmly asked, "You said you were going to call a teacher, right?" A bead of sweat rolled down the man's temple, his eyes wide. Junwoo calmly continued, "I wonder if the teacher would even dare to come." In the man's mind, a recent scene flashed Junwoo's own father and uncles beating him to a pulp, intensifying his panic. Who is this kid? Junwoo revealed a tattoo on his shoulder, his eyes challenging as he looked straight at the man. "Go on, call him. Call your damn teacher." The man looked down at Junwoo, his mind reeling. What kind of middle schooler has a tattoo? Is his family actually mafia? Junwoo lay on the floor, the corner of his mouth curving into a slight sarcastic smile. Now, sitting comfortably on the sofa next to the box of alcohol, Junwoo advised, "Stop posturing. Go call the teacher or get lost." The man stammered, I don't know your name yet, but I'll find out from the second-year homeroom teacher," he hissed. "You bastard," and stormed out shouting, "Just you wait." Junwoo calmly watched him go, saying nothing, his face emotionless. Junwoo thought, easier than I expected. He sat cross-legged on the sofa beside the still-open box. Han Junwoo's name tag was clearly visible to the camera. A knowing smile flickered across his face. Inside and around this box were several bottles of soju and many open packs of cigarettes. The man returned with another person complaining as they walked, "That Junwoo kid, he's not the troublemaker type. He's quiet as a mouse in class." He continued, "I swear, he said his father was in the gangster world, and he even has a tattoo." The other person countered, "If that were true, we would have known during the vocational skills training. Let's go check the duty room." They burst into the room. The one who had been provoked by Junwoo yelled, "Han Junwoo!" But the room was empty with only alcohol and cigarettes laid out on the table. One asked, "Where is he?" The other sniffed the air, then asked suspiciously, This smell of alcohol? Has someone been drinking in here?" The first man frantically denied it. "No, I didn't touch any alcohol." He then pointed. "Look." His finger pointed to the table where clear traces of recent presence remained: alcohol, cigarettes, and beer cans. A close-up showed an open pack of cigarettes and several beer cans still dewy on the coffee table. The second person tried to defuse the situation. "I know, teacher. I know you didn't drink." But the other instructor was still angry. "Nitomonosit really—" The instructor looked out the window, his eyes reflected in the rain-streaked glass, glinting with worry. The other person said, "Well, for now, let's just go find him." The sound of heavy rain continued to drum on the roof. Han Junwoo stood alone, turning his head to look out into the downpour, silent in the deserted corridor. A distant shot showed him as a solitary, glowing figure standing on a high cliff overlooking a vast, roaring, angry sea. Junwoo looked up at the sky, the rain pouring down each drop, feeling as if it pierced through him. The dim light reflecting off the gray sea highlighted his lonely figure amidst the storm. White text stood out against the backdrop of the precarious cliff and the fiercely crashing waves below like a final statement for everything. "The play we prepared ends here. This is the final curtain." Standing silently on the precipice, Han Junwoo slowly closed his eyes, thinking, "I thought I would feel relieved." A close-up of his red sneaker right at the edge of the cliff was accompanied by his thoughts. But even if it's a lie, standing before the end still stirs a strange feeling within me. Overlapping dreamlike flashback sequences appeared in the frame. Junwoo mused, "I used to believe I was living in a movie, but looking back, I was nothing more than a common swindler and a criminal." His silhouette walked along a glowing film strip, his back to the viewer, his inner voice narrating, "If I stay here, I'll just repeat my old life." Han Junu's 35-year life officially ended today. A hand tilted a dark liquor bottle. A single drop fell slowly from its mouth, heavy with resignation. Jun-woo stood in the cold rain, his eyes shut tight, his mind echoing. Today is indeed a perfect day to die. An unexpected tear rolled down his cheek. Then suddenly a shout rang out. "We found him!" Under the torrential rain, two men holding umbrellas looked horrified as they saw Jun-woo standing on the cliff. One yelled, "Han Jun-woo, what the hell are you doing up there?" Jun-woo bowed his head, his eyes dark. A single tear fell silently. One of the two men quickly shone a flashlight and rushed towards the cliff, yelling as he ran, "Get down! It's dangerous up there!" An overhead shot showed Jun-woo standing on the cliff's edge, the other two men frantically running towards him. Jun-woo sighed softly to himself. Enough. Everything should end here. His red sneaker took another step closer to the precipice. The two men watched in horror as Jun-woo spread his arms wide as if wanting to sever all ties with the people who... Jun-woo fell from the cliff, his body seeming to slip off an old film reel. The narrator's voice sounded, and from outside, a hand reached out touching a spiraling film strip as if yearning to escape the past where he had lived as a terrible person. In front of a school, someone yelled angrily, "They've run off again, those scumbags," then muttered, "And they even doubled the performance fee, claiming they came from far away." In a hallway, a man asked his colleague, "There are only 5 hours left until the show. What do we do now?" The other man replied coldly, "What else? Refund the tickets first, then check the accommodation and travel expenses. Send everything to me." The man in the red-collared shirt growled, "This time we absolutely must sue for compensation." But immediately after he sighed, Forget it. How much money could small stage actors like them possibly have?" As he walked away, he added instructions. "Check the customer information. Send apology messages to each one. Keep them short. Don't explain too much." The remaining man scratched his head, thinking to himself, "My director is too kind." A close-up of the director's face. He was pensive. "People say in business you have to trust. Damn it." The other man still thought, "Aside from that, he really is a good person." The narrator's voice, Du-man-sik, began, "I am Du-man-sik. I was a National Assembly member just 5 years ago. At 45, I was recognized and my career was soaring. But perhaps that very thing became the beginning of my downfall." A flashback showed him standing on a podium. He recalled, "There were too many people surrounding me just to profit." This was illustrated by two figures with gleaming eyes, one of them clutching a briefcase overflowing with cash. Even those I once trusted eventually betrayed me. An image showed him alone under a spotlight amidst the scheming whispers of two shadowy figures. By the time I realized, newspapers flashed headlines, "Assemblyman Mansik embroiled in bribery scandal," and "Assemblyman Du-man-sik accused of fraud." He continued, "All that remained were fabricated accusations and an overwhelming sense of loneliness as everyone turned their backs on me. The only path left was to leave the corrupt world of politics. My first effort in a new career was to open a small theater." An image showed him wiping sweat, his hand appearing bloodied, implying past wounds. But 5 years later, running the theater turned out to be anything but easy. Initially, the theater did quite well, attracting audiences despite being in a rural area and having a modest space. Our strategy was to recruit young actors who hadn't had a chance to shine instead of choosing famous stars. He understood well that an actor's name is the first thing that draws an audience like a newspaper headline, "Famous actor guarantees box office success for Nemo Theater." But the true quality of a play doesn't lie in fame. Empty seats reflect silence and depth. More important is how well they embody their roles and how deeply they can move people. That's why I persisted in pursuing unpolished gems, like a scene of a young actor giving his all on stage. Thanks to this, the theater gradually became known as a place for discovering hidden talent. But that success didn't last. Those young actors, though they turned their backs on us, always had their eyes set on Seoul, where dreams take flight. So every time they became famous, they left the theater for major companies in Seoul. This was the third time something like this had happened, making Do-man-sik sigh and wonder, is it my fault or the fault of this world? Walking through the theater hallway, he heard a strange sound coming from one of the stage doors. He guessed he must have forgotten to turn off the stage equipment before talking to the assistant director earlier. Peeking through the crack in the door, he cautiously wondered what was happening inside. In the empty theater, a teenager sat alone silently and intently watching the brightly lit stage. Do-man-sik recognized the figure, thinking, "Of course it's that kid again. He's been hanging around here a lot lately." At first glance, he looked like a high school student. He observed the boy wearing a work uniform that seemed out of place for his age. Though he didn't know who the boy was, he remembered that after every viewing, he would leave a few bills as if for payment. Leaning out from the ticket booth, Do-man-sik muttered, "A tiny theater like mine doesn't even have regular audience members. Maybe this kid is the only one." Stepping inside, he approached and asked, "What's your name, son?" The boy sitting still on the seat replied concisely, "My name, I don't have one of those." Do-man-sik looked at him, thinking the boy probably didn't want to give his real name. His expression tightened slightly in annoyance. Even Mud, the neighborhood dog, has a name. He asked again, "You look like a high school student. How old are you? Are you still in school?" The boy stood up and replied, "I'm 17, but I don't go to school." The boy faced Do-man-sik, then bowed his head to apologize, explaining, "Since no one said anything, I thought I was allowed to watch." As he turned to leave, Do-man-sik suddenly called out, "What?" Then asked if the boy thought he was scolding him, trying to explain that wasn't his intention. The boy stopped, turned his head as if he'd just realized something, then simply replied, "Yes." He then pulled out a folded bill and offered it to Do-man-sik. The man looked at the bill and asked, "What's this?" The boy said, "I really enjoyed it today too," and brought the money closer. "It's just a pity it was cut short." Do-man-sik, stunned, exclaimed, "Hey, when did I ask you for money?" He immediately reached out and grabbed the boy's wrist. His expression gradually turned to concern. Staring at the boy's wrist, Do-man-sik asked worriedly, "Is your wrist injured?" The boy replied softly, "It's nothing, sir. I'll go home, put on a pain relief patch and sleep it off. It'll be fine." Do-man-sik looked down at the boy's hand, still unable to hide his concern. The boy added, "But thank you for worrying about me." He looked up at Do-man-sik with a calm, unreadable gaze. Turning away, he announced, "I'm leaving now." Do-man-sik immediately called after him, "Wait, are you only interested in the play?" This made the boy turn back, his expression puzzled and confused. Do-man-sik stammered, "There are many more recordings and scripts inside," then mumbled, "Nitrogen monoxide. Scratching his head, Do-man-sik, worried he looked like a pervert luring a child with candy. While the boy stood right at the door, he glanced back, his expression unreadable, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Do-man-sik then suggested, "Come in. I'll put some medicine on it, then you can go home." The boy hesitated for a moment, his hand on the doorknob before stepping fully inside. He glanced back, his expression serious and thoughtful. Later at a diner, Do-man-sik mumbled, "I thought you'd just ignore me and leave." He looked at the boy eating and remarked, "You seem very hungry, huh?" Sitting opposite him at the table, Do-man-sik said, "You remind me of someone." Then he asked, "Why do you do that kind of work? And this dish is really bland." While eating, the boy replied, "Everyone has their own circumstances." Meanwhile, Do-man-sik carefully observed the boy's young, handsome face and suggested, "With a face like yours, there are many better jobs you know." The boy continued eating, his expression unreadable. Dumansik, holding a stack of papers, asked, "What's this?" While the boy was mid-chew, he looked up and asked back, He held up a rolled-up script titled A Chance Encounter, explaining, "Oh, it's a script I just received." As Dumansik stared at the title, he seemed interested and suggested, "Let me take a look," then gestured for the boy to hand over the papers. The boy took it, opened it, and read, thinking to himself, "So this is a script." A page from the script appeared with dialogue for Jae-hyung. "In life, are you more attracted to kind, easy-to-talk-to people, or taller people?" And a note, "Seen while walking to school together. Jae-hyung and Yoo-jin ask each other about their ideal types." Dumansik observed him reading. The boy quietly hummed, He continued flipping pages, his eyes still glued to the script, while Dumansik watched him intently. As he turned to the next page, Dumansik's expression changed slightly, a mix of surprise and concentration. Suddenly, Dumansik snatched the script, declaring, "That's enough. This hasn't been officially announced yet. I can't let you see all of it." Inwardly, he thought, "I figured, what would a country bumpkin kid know?" Mansik silently admitted to himself that he had been too impulsive in showing the script, and then seeing the boy too engrossed, had hastily taken it back. He wondered if he had been too careless. Meanwhile, the boy, still holding the A Chance Encounter script, politely said, "Thank you for letting me take a look." Feeling let down by the indifferent reaction, Mansik pressed, "You've only seen a little bit, but what do you think? Do you think it will be a success?" The boy humbly replied, "I don't know, sir. I don't really understand much about these things." This prompted Mansik to defend the script. "I poured my heart and soul into that. The writer is a perfectionist, extremely meticulous. Every word has meaning. There's not a single redundant line." After a moment of silence from the boy, Mansik asked, "Are you not interested because it's a romance play?" The boy shook his head. "It's not that. I'm just not sure if this play is suitable for your theater." Mansik, surprised, asked back, "My theater? What do you mean?" The boy pointed to the first page of the script. "The second line on that first page." Repeating the boy's words, "The second line on the first page, huh?" Mansik flipped back through the pages to find the section. He read aloud the stage directions and dialogue where characters appear walking and chatting about their ideal types, then muttered, "This girl really has no stable taste." He read on to the description of another character appearing, and her friend pointing, "There's your boyfriend." Mansik's eyes gradually widened as if he understood something. "Wait a minute. This kid." Mansik stared in disbelief, asking, "He remembers all of it." He mumbled, "What is this?" while still eating. The boy began to recite a long passage from the script, describing the scene where Kyung-soo appears from behind an umbrella, startling the other characters. In Mansik's mind, a thought flashed. This kid, he hasn't even read it for a minute yet. He's quoting every line, every emotion perfectly. Kyung-soo raises the umbrella. The other person startles. Looking at the boy calmly eating, Mansik silently realized it hasn't even been a minute. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, still puzzled. Mansik wondered, "But what does this have to do with my theater?" At that moment, the boy pointed to the part of the script where the characters meet under the umbrella. Mansik nodded, replying with a soft, "Okay." The boy astutely pointed out that if 3 characters were walking and talking, they would need about 20 steps to deliver all their lines, while Mansik's stage was only 13 steps wide. Gesturing with his hands, he explained that the umbrellas would obscure the characters in shadow, even if the lighting was well arranged, and the main character's dramatic entrance would also be hidden. To fix this, he suggested changing the setting from a school route to a bus stop. This would allow the characters to stand still without cutting any dialogue. Mansik listened intently. The boy continued his analysis. While they're talking, the other person appears holding an umbrella, then directs the umbrella towards the audience, temporarily obscuring the character, thus creating a sense of curiosity. As he spoke, he took a bite of food, concluding, "Ultimately, that scene has to be really dramatic for the audience." Mansik looked flustered, trying to dismiss what he'd just heard, stammering, "Just ignore me." Then adding, "I just thought it was a bit too much work." The boy continued eating nonchalantly, seemingly unaffected by Mansik's reaction. Mansik pushed the script back towards the eating boy. "Want to continue?" When the boy asked, "Continue what?" Mansik explained, "I mean what you were just saying. I want to hear more about the other parts." The boy paused, put down his spoon, and took the script from Mansik's hand. He began to flip through the pages again. Mansik watched him attentively, chin in hand, his eyes thoughtful. A close-up of Mansik's mouth with an internal monologue. "The things this kid is saying are really shocking me." Mansik mentally listed the elements the boy had considered: stage layout, movement paths, audience perspectives, actor positioning. He continued to reflect on how the boy could even grasp the timing for adjusting the lighting brightness. While they were sitting in the restaurant, the boy holding the script even considered the color temperature of the lights, the placement of the lights, and even the pauses and breaths between lines of dialogue. Mansik realized that even details that a whole team of experts would struggle to fully analyze, this boy had addressed them all. A bead of sweat rolled down Mansik's temple as he gradually understood the depth of the boy's thinking. He was amazed that all these complex elements were being perfectly adjusted for his own stage just from the words of a child. The script titled "A Chance Encounter" was pushed back towards the boy. Stunned, Mansik opened his mouth. "You?" Then he asked, "When did you start learning directing? You look like you've been professionally trained by a theater troupe. You watch the videos at the theater because you design storyboards yourself, right?" The boy just replied with a surprised, "Huh?" Mansik pressed on. "What are you currently doing related to that?" "Ah," the boy, slightly flustered, replied. "Ah, I'm sorry." He confessed, "Actually, I only watched a play for the first time here recently." Mansik was speechless, his eyes welling up with disbelief. The boy added, "I originally intended to watch a movie, but there are no movie theaters around here." Mansik asked again, "So this is the first time you've watched a play?" A close-up of Mansik's hand, trembling slightly as he tried to process the information. "He thought I met this kid about 3 weeks ago." Does that mean a kid who just started high school grasped the entire feel of the stage in just 3 weeks? He covered his mouth, sitting stunned. A play isn't just about the actor's performance. 2 actors performing on stage. Mansik's internal monologue continued. Ordinary people just simply think of it as acting. Another scene showed actors in dramatic poses with a voiceover, but in reality, it's much more than that. Words like author, art, music, lighting, director appeared on screen, along with behind-the-scenes footage of the technical crew working hard, illustrating a comprehensive art form involving many specialized professions. Looking at the boy sitting across the table, Mansik thought, and yet this kid just skimmed through the script and handled all those elements by himself. He continued to recall, he's only been watching plays for 3 weeks. While the boy continued to eat nonchalantly, Mansik wondered again, if it's true that 3 weeks ago was his first time watching a play, then what about rewriting the dialogue? The boy paused his chopsticks midair, his spoon still hovering before his mouth, and looked up with a slightly startled expression. Mansik, holding the script, said, "Then let's try to rebuild it based on what you said." Hope began to stir within him. "I want to see a little more, not just about stage direction, but whether he can also provide answers about roles and acting." The boy crossed his arms, thought for a moment, then said, "Can't do it. I don't know who the actors are." In Mansik's mind, he admitted, "Yeah, that's a bit much. Writing dialogue and directing are 2 different things." While he was still thinking, the boy stirring his food spoke up. "It's not because of that. He clarified, "You have to observe a person's life to understand them, including the habits they can't hide with acting or the stiffness in their facial muscles." He concluded, "Without knowing those things, it can't be done. Each person also pronounces words with different vibrations and pitches." Mansik exclaimed in his head, "It's not a machine." Then he wondered, how can one person pay attention to all those details? But then he had to admit, "But it's true." The boy said softly, "I know that." And Mansik whispered to himself, "I'm just trying to deny it, because the truth is too hard to accept." The boy looked at Mansik and said, "Try smiling in front of a mirror." He continued his observation. "Your pupils will dilate slightly, and you won't even realize it. It's very suitable for playing the role of a murderer." Mansik was stunned by the remark, only managing to utter, "What?" The boy calmly replied, "Just kidding." Then he stood up, a faint smile on his face. Mansik put a hand to his chin, thinking, not only good with the stage and direction, this kid really is. The boy, now standing, asked, "Not leaving?" Then continued, "Well, I'll go first then." As he left, he said, "Thanks for the meal," leaving Mansik sitting frozen at the table, completely astounded. Mansik burst out laughing, admitting he felt as if he'd just been bewitched. He wondered where that kid had appeared from his mind, still filled with dozens of unanswered questions. But then he thought, "I'll probably see him again tomorrow." The scene shifts to a construction site where a voice from off-screen calls out, "Hey kid, whose kid are you?" In a room that looks like an office, Junu declared, "I've come to get my money." Another person not yet shown asked back, "Did we ever leave money with you?" Junu held out his hand and confidently replied, "Yes, you did." The other person, stunned, yelled, "What? What did you just say? Standing before two men." Junu repeated, "You said you'd pay later. Now I want to receive the exact amount, 5870011. One of the two men angrily called him an insolent brat, while the other behind him smirked. "Paying later means never, kid. You're too naive to understand this world." Junu calmly asked, "So you're not going to pay me that money?" The aggressive one snapped, "Of course not, kid. I don't have that kind of money." Junu sighed, accepting the fact that he wouldn't be paid. In his mind, he thought, "I've let this slide a few times to avoid trouble, but this time I gave them a final chance." A flashback showed an envelope of money being exchanged. The narration explained that they often made excuses to avoid payment economic difficulties, or that it happened frequently with workers. Jun-woo, holding a glass of water, wondered if they knew who they were messing with. He understood they thought he wouldn't dare resist because he was young and an orphan. Furthermore, Jun-woo was sure they were also skimming wages from other workers. A quick flashback showed one of them gleefully counting money. He had observed how easily they manipulated and ignored other laborers. He realized it was their usual way of doing business. However, a practical concern flashed in Jun-woo's mind. But where am I going to find another job now? His expression hardened, his eyes fixed on the two men. A single thought in his head. Damn bastards. Just then, another man burst into the office, yelling angrily, "You dare cut my wages!" Meanwhile, at the empty theater, Mansik sat alone, thinking, "Why hasn't that kid come today?" Crossing his arms, Mansik sighed. "He's usually here by now." Suddenly, a voice called out, "Boss." One of Mansik's employees suggested, "How about we try going to the construction site?" Another employee approached Mansik, asking, "Where could a 17-year-old be?" The employee replied, "Maybe at school." But Mansik shook his head. "No, he doesn't go to school. He works at a construction site." The employee repeated, "Then he's probably at the construction site." Mansik, still seated in the theater, didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" The employee reiterated, "Boss, you just said the kid works at a construction site. He's probably there now." Mansik, as if jolted awake, yelled, "That's right," and immediately rushed off. The employee hurriedly called after him, Wait, boss. You still have a meeting. Mansik ran through the rain, blaming himself. It's true. Why didn't I think of it sooner? He said he works at a construction site, so he must be there. He panted, sweat mixing with the rain, clearly trying his best to run as fast as possible. Arriving in front of a multi-story construction site, Mansik wondered, is this the place? He approached a temporary container office. From inside, the chaotic sounds of people talking could be heard. Mansik gently pushed the door open a little, peeking inside. Then he kicked the door wide open, angrily yelling, "What's your shortchanging wages?" Inside, Junu stood calmly. One foreman was pressed against a table, the other stunned. "Sir, you're not allowed in here," Mansik, furious, yelled at them. "Nothing better to do than cheat a kid? Aren't you ashamed?" Then he kicked over the table, roaring, "You bastards!" One of them screamed. "Ah, sir, what are you doing?" Junu touched his ear and said calmly, "I'll report all of you to the Ministry of Labor." Mansik turned to Junu, angrily asking, "What are you still standing there for?" He pulled Junu's arm. "Let's go! Why waste time with this trash?" A foreman on the ground groaned, "Ugh, my money!" The scene shifts to outside a modern building, the sky clear and blue. Junu stood outside, his expression annoyed, thinking, damn it. Inside an office, Mansik asked, "Why do you keep putting up with these things? Why get so angry?" He continued, "Aren't you angry too? You should have been paid properly. I'll report them all to the police." Junu calmly asked back, "Why do you have to do that?" Mansik leaned back in his chair, wiping his brow. "When an adult helps you, you should be thankful, not argue." Mansik's eyes glinted with determination, as if an idea had just struck him. He looked at Junu, noticing his bandaged wrist resting lightly on his thigh as he sat silently. Then Mansik said forcefully, "Don't do jobs like that anymore. Come work here." A bead of sweat rolled down Mansik's temple. He let out a small, "ah," as if suddenly realizing the implication of his offer. He scrolled through his phone, muttering, "Come to think of it, how much did I lose last month?" Junu sat on the chair, listening quietly. Mansik looked up from his phone and asked directly, "Well," he explained, "working here you can watch plays whenever you want. Isn't that good?" Junu looked straight at him and asked a simple question. "Why are you helping me?" Mansik turned his face away and said quickly, "Who's helping whom? It just so happens we're short-staffed for part-timers." Junu asked directly, "Do you pay well? Seeing you stressed out all day, you probably don't have much money." Mansik clutched his chest, looking flustered. Sweating, Mansik asked back, "What, you think I'd cheat you out of your wages, too?" Junu nodded, replying concisely, "Yes." Oh, this made Mansik silently fume. "This kid," Mansik then said decisively, "even if I have to work at the construction site in your place, I will make sure you get paid." A determined expression was clear on Mansik's face as memories of the previous day flooded back. A close-up of Mansik's eyes revealed his steely resolve. Mansik recalled their earlier conversation, thinking, "I don't remember everything that kid said, and I can't prove anything, but the feeling at that moment is still vivid." A close-up of Mansik's eyes again affirmed, "I can't let a kid like that work at a construction site." While Junu sat alone in the soft light, Mansik's thoughts continued. Everyone has a place to belong. Honestly, keeping him right now is a loss for me, but I still want him by my side. Junu looked up, his bright blue eyes meeting Mansik's gaze, silently accepting the offer. Returning to the present, Mansik was sitting in his office and suddenly asked, "About what you said earlier." Junu, sitting on the sofa with his hands clasped gently, asked, "Do part-timers get to watch plays?" The sun set behind the theater building where Mansik was now employing Junu. Inside, Mansik stood by a pillar, his impatience unconcealed. He wondered why Junu hadn't come out yet. A bead of sweat rolled down Mansik's temple as he considered that Junu might be more meticulous than he thought. He remembered it had been a week since Junu started working there, and today he had only asked him to clean up the somewhat messy basement rehearsal room. Mansik grew increasingly impatient as 3 hours had passed since he assigned the task to Jun-woo. An angry vein throbbed on Mansik's forehead as his irritation mounted. Walking down the stairs, Mansik thought, does he have OCD? But even so, cleaning shouldn't take more than an hour. I was even planning to have dinner with him. As he approached the rehearsal room area, Mansik called out, "Hey, how much longer are you going to take?" But as he entered, Mansik froze, surprised, and asked Jun-woo, "What is all this?" He saw Jun-woo sitting amidst a neatly arranged pile of scripts and equipment. Jun-woo looked up, pointed towards a bookshelf, and began to explain that it fell down, referring to the shelf that once held the scripts. Mansik saw the scripts scattered on the floor in front of the bookshelf and immediately pictured what had happened. He guessed that while cleaning the bookshelf had tipped over, sending scripts flying, and at that moment, Jun-woo had gotten engrossed. This made Mansik chuckle softly. However, his eyes were drawn to a neatly stacked pile of scripts on a small wooden chair next to a decorative cabinet. Glancing around the room filled with props like fake roses and a director's chair, Mansik asked Jun-woo what he was doing. Jun-woo, holding a script in his hand, explained, "I just wanted to read one." When Mansik confirmed, read a script," Jun-woo nodded. "Yes, I was just reading it with my eyes." Pointing towards the scripts on the table and looking around the room, Mansik wondered why he wasn't just simply reading and suspected he was trying to act it out himself. Mansik's gaze fell on the script Jun-woo was holding, on which the words "The Seagull" were printed, prompting him to ask, "A Russian play?" He wondered why he chose that one when there were dozens of Korean scripts. But Jun-woo replied, "I've already read all the other ones," leaving Mansik undeniably surprised. "What?" Pointing to his ear in utter disbelief, Mansik seemed to want to confirm. "You just said you read—" Jun-woo nodded. "I've read them all." A close-up of Mansik's face showed deep astonishment as Jun-woo added, "I read all the ones I neatly arranged earlier." A strange purple light enveloped Mansik as he asked incredulously, "You really read all the scripts on that bookshelf?" Then he connected this to Jun-woo reading the Russian script amidst a messy pile of papers on the table. Still curious, Mansik asked, "Do you know Russian?" Jun-woo held the script in one hand, while his other hand pointed towards the shelf and replied, "Osis. Nick. That one." Mansik followed Jun-woo's hand and saw a book on the shelf, then asked, "Is that a dictionary?" While Mansik was still skeptical, saying that a dictionary could only look up a few words, Jun-woo explained, "I looked up the words and roughly understood it." Mansik's eyes widened in astonishment, exclaiming, "What?" And in his mind, he wondered, "What the hell is this?" Looking at Jun-woo standing amidst the neatly arranged scripts, Mansik wondered if this kid had really organized everything just by vaguely understanding a few words. Mansik's gaze fell on the open pages of The Seagull that Jun-woo was holding. He silently recalled how many times he himself had pored over that script. Mansik realized the scene Jun-woo was reading was the moment just before the character in a fit of rage smashes everything in the room. Looking at the scattered props, he understood they weren't placed randomly. He was astounded to realize Jun-woo had arranged everything according to the character's emotions in that scene. Mansik was truly surprised at how the kid had fully expressed the character's emotions just by arranging items like a clock, a quill, and an inkstone. However, immediately after, Mansik also criticized in his head, "This kid doesn't even know the basic terminology, yet he chose a classic play he doesn't even understand." Looking at the pensive Jun-woo, Mansik asked directly, "What do you ultimately want to become?" Mansik continued, "Why do you always stay silent whenever I'm here? What dream are you ultimately pursuing?" "Stage manager, director." Jun-woo sat silently on the chair while Mansik urged, "Come on, now's the time for you to tell me." Finally, Jun-woo replied, "My dream is just to live like this in my current way." This stunned Mansik, who exclaimed, "Like this?" Pointing around the room filled with scripts and props, Mansik asked, "Then what is all this for?" While Junwoo remained silent, not answering, he explained that he was simply preparing the stage before the performance began. This made Mansik repeat in his head, preparing the stage. Observing Mansik realized Junwoo didn't deny it. Mansik asked if Junwoo intended to rehearse, but he just remained silent, his eyes downcast, saying nothing. Seeing Junwoo didn't deny it, Mansik scratched his head, muttering to himself that he wasn't refuting it, and behind him was a promotional poster for an illegal performance. Mansik scratched his head, realizing Junwoo might also be interested in acting something he had previously thought the boy was only passionate about directing. A flashback showed Junwoo standing in the audience, broom in hand, intently watching a play unfolding on stage. Mansik voiced his observation that from what he'd seen, Junwoo was more of a director than an actor, and wondered if preparing so many props for just one scene was really necessary. Junwoo, his blue eyes bright and serious, replied that not a single item was placed there randomly. He further clarified that everything on stage had a clear purpose. A close-up showed meticulously arranged script pages, a clock and a pen set against a backdrop of a city dazzling with neon lights. Mansik somewhat dismissed it, suggesting it was just an excuse because good actors don't need to be so elaborate. With a cold gaze, Junwoo concluded that was precisely why they needed the stage. Mansik gestured with his hand, asking Junwoo again, "What does the stage have to do with acting?" Junwoo turned his face away, looking towards the elaborately decorated table, explaining that every part of the stage, from actors to props, must work in harmony. Placing his hand on a script, Junwoo emphasized that harmony was only part of it. What he craved was to transform the stage into a perfect whole. Mansik stood there, one hand on his chin, observing Junwoo, who was now looking at him. After a moment of silence, Junwoo looked directly at Mansik and declared he would prove it right there. He stepped towards the table, surprising Mansik, who exclaimed, "What?" A close-up of Junwoo's hand pressing firmly down on the script and papers on the table. Leaning over the table, Junwoo radiated an intense purple aura, all attention focused on the script and surrounding props. Mansik stood by observing with a serious expression as he witnessed Junwoo begin to embody a role. A dramatic shot showed Junwoo's hand covering his face, followed by a gritty transition effect ending with a close-up of Mansik's eyes widening in astonishment. In that instant, Mansik understood. He wasn't just simply getting into character. That contorted face was the expression of someone cornered with no way out. He realized Junwoo wasn't just speaking lines amidst props. He had truly transformed into a completely different person. Mansik was baffled as to how Junwoo could do it, especially when his eyes were bloodshot. The blood vessels clearly ruptured, a physical reaction impossible to fake. This made Mansik wonder if achieving such a deep level of immersion in an instant was even possible. Junwoo, now fully transformed, slammed his hand on the table, screaming in anguish, "What is the meaning of all this?" He trembled, collapsing heavily onto the table, surrounded by chaotic scripts and props. Junwoo staggered around the table unsteadily. One deliberate step landed on the nearby wall. Beneath his foot, a clock on the floor was crushed. Suddenly, Junwoo swung his leg forcefully, kicking away the surrounding props. Mansik, terrified, yelled, "That's dangerous!" Realizing there were too many objects obstructing Junwoo's movements, Mansik's eyes widened as he saw Junwoo's hand suddenly reach behind him, grabbing the back of the nearby chair. With a lurching step, Junwoo leaned heavily into the chair as if about to collapse. Finally, he plopped down onto the chair, head bowed, looking utterly exhausted. Once seated, Junwoo buried his face in his hands, an image of unparalleled despair. A chilling truth made Mansik stand frozen, his eyes showing profound astonishment. He understood that even when Junwoo fell and grabbed that chair, it wasn't accidental. His posture and the angle of his fall were completely natural. The shattered props scattered around along with Junwoo's dazed eyes, as if he no longer had the strength to stand all combined to create a perfect scene. Looking up with haunting blue eyes, hands still clutching his head, Junwoo was completely immersed in the character's despair. Man-Sik acknowledged that Junwoo was right. Every detail of his performance blended perfectly with the stage setting. As Junwoo gradually came out of character, Man-Sik in a daze whispered softly, "It's over." But immediately after, with a determined gaze, he thought, "This can't be left as it is." Looking straight at Junwoo with his bright blue eyes, Man-Sik declared firmly, "You absolutely must step onto the stage." Junwoo's narration voice, "It's been 2 years since I cut ties with my father. At that time, I was walking through a bustling city street, a backpack on my shoulder, a modern building behind me. A flashback showed him wearing a construction helmet, wiping blood from his hand, telling himself, 'As long as I'm determined, I can live an easy life.' But under a bright, white-clouded sky, he affirmed, 'I swore I would never do those things again.' And so every day at the construction site carrying heavy sacks became a kind of agonizing satisfaction. The simple words, 'Yeah, it's a bit satisfying,' appeared clearly on a blank white background. However, as Junwoo sat eating a bento box next to a large truck, he admitted to himself, 'But I know very well.' As he picked up food with chopsticks, he deeply felt what he had longed for a long time. A colleague called out upon seeing Junwoo eating, teasing that at his age he should be out having fun, not stuck here. That person also casually mentioned hearing about a newly opened theater in the next district and suggested Junwoo check it out. A close-up showed Junwoo's bright blue eyes glinting with a bit of interest upon hearing the suggestion. In the fading twilight, Junwoo silently thought about the word theater with a pensive look. His white sneakers appeared moving forward, indicating his decision to go, though he said nothing. Inside the theater, Junwoo sat on a stool intently watching actors rehearsing a scene on stage where a sofa was already set. Standing near the entrance, he realized this place wasn't a movie theater as he'd thought, but the stage for a play. From the back of the theater, Junwoo silently observed the brightly lit stage below. There was one person sitting alone throughout the performance. He noticed a man in the audience sighing loudly, but he didn't pay much attention to it. What truly occupied his mind was the strange, intensifying feeling as he watched the play unfold before him. Initially, he was a little disappointed because it wasn't a movie, but that feeling quickly vanished. He began to feel moved, a deep emotion he hadn't experienced in a very long time. He discovered that the energy radiating from the actors living truthfully on stage in front of the audience was completely different from so-called movie magic. It was at that moment, for the first time in his life, he clearly felt an intense desire to stand on that stage. From that day on, he started going to the theater right after work every single day, as if it were a place he belonged. His body seemed to act even before his mind could think. Until one day, as he was sitting quietly as usual, the director suddenly turned and asked for his name. When he didn't answer immediately, the director repeated the question firmly and decisively, determined to know who he was. From then on, the man everyone thought was just a member of the theater crew kept asking about him, even offering to get him treatment here and then leaving immediately after. Junwoo felt the man was a bit too meddlesome, but also not bad. The way he spoke was a bit blunt, but held an obvious kindness, clearly not the type to harm others. Once Director Do even grabbed Junwoo's arm, pulling him away from work, reprimanding him for wasting time with such people. Junwoo, stunned, thought to himself, "I can't believe there are still people like this in the world." Then he sadly thought, that person must have also lived a life full of suffering. Returning to the present after another excellent performance by Junwoo, Director Do looked at him with a serious gaze and said that things couldn't go on like this forever. He looked straight into Junwoo's eyes and said earnestly, "You must get on stage now." As Junwoo was preparing props and about to start a scene, Director Do recalled everything that had happened. Honestly, he didn't expect much from this boy's acting ability. He believed that emotions came from life experience, and no matter how talented Junwoo was, he was still just a 17-year-old boy. A boy who couldn't yet overcome the limitations in expression and acting. However, Director Do was also very clear about the extraordinary intelligence Jun-woo possessed. He understood that the abilities that impressed him in Jun-woo were merely the necessary preparatory tools for becoming an actor. Jun-woo needed a real stage, not just this rehearsal room. But Jun-woo himself gently said while preparing props that he didn't want to go that far. Director Do continued to persuade Jun-woo fervently, asserting that his talent was truly rare, and if he trusted him and followed him, he could reach great heights. But Jun-woo calmly replied that he liked his current life. As they left the rehearsal room, Jun-woo unexpectedly asked if all the scripts were kept in the rehearsal room. That question made the director turn back to look at him with surprise. He asked again, "You really don't want to act?" He couldn't believe someone with such talent would refuse the stage. Jun-woo simply replied, "I don't want to become famous." Director Do looked at him skeptically. At that moment, he realized this teenager was fully aware of his own abilities and talent. He gradually thought that Jun-woo's indifferent attitude was simply because he understood that once he stepped on stage, fame would be inevitable. But Director Do still continued to try to convince him. He said that maybe just becoming famous wasn't enough, but with this talent he couldn't give up. He said in a sympathetic tone that he understood Jun-woo had been through a lot in life, but also reminded him that he was still very young, then asked what he had experienced to carry such a heavy burden, adding that he himself had also struggled greatly to get to his current position. Director Do shouted with intense emotion that he would take responsibility for everything that happened from now on, and he urged Jun-woo to live his own life without any fear. Jun-woo laughed bitterly upon hearing the word responsibility. In his mind, the question echoed, how could someone he'd only known for over a month take responsibility for his life? He sarcastically asked Director Do back, "So you'll kill someone for me if you want to take responsibility?" And he was stunned when Director Do, without hesitation, replied firmly and loudly, "I will!" Then he shouted again, full of passion, asking Jun-woo for the third time, "Will you act for me?" After that conversation, Jun-woo stood backstage dressed in a formal performance costume, preparing to step onto the stage for the first time in his life. His heart pounded, slightly nervous as he stood there peeking through a crack in the curtain at the waiting audience. The audience was settled, waiting for the performance to begin. The auditorium was completely full. Jun-woo stood silently behind the curtain, looking at the bright lights shining on the stage, a mix of emotions welling up inside him. He quietly admitted to himself that he now fully understood the older man's feelings for him. Director Do truly just wanted to make sure Jun-woo's talent wouldn't be wasted. Clearly, he hadn't opened the way for him into the theater just to watch plays, but to give him a chance to use his God-given gift. Jun-woo remembered Director Do's words about taking responsibility for him, and wondered if that was the real reason he couldn't refuse. The stage lights slowly came on. Showtime had arrived. The stage curtain opened. Jun-woo appeared for the first time before the audience, standing proudly and confidently on stage. From backstage, Director Do intently watched his every move with great anticipation and focus. Director Do smiled excitedly and whispered, "It's starting." Someone beside him asked, "Is this the boy you mentioned?" And the director proudly replied, "Yes, that's him. But don't be too surprised. He's truly special." The assistant replied with a worried look, asking if Jun-woo was really ready, especially since he had replaced the lead actor who quit just 5 days ago, and the script was full of long monologues. He also doubted Jun-woo's acting experience, wondering how a kid who had never learned the basics of theater could master a role in just 5 days. But another person immediately corrected, saying that Jun-woo didn't even have 5 days, but only exactly 12 hours to prepare, stunning everyone present. Director Do began to explain to that man, emphasizing that it had only been 12 hours since he gave the script to Jun-woo. Jun-woo stood on stage with absolute composure, waiting for the right moment to begin. He slowly and confidently raised his hand towards the light shining down from above the stage that was the first movement to open his performance. Jun-woo sat down on a chair and began to murmur lines with melancholy. I'm still trapped in those memories. He continued in a calm and sad voice. Now, I've lost her. Junwoo went on with a deep and emotional tone expressing his sorrow, saying the world had imprisoned him in darkness and silence. And with a choked emotional voice, he uttered that the moment he first saw her, time seemed to stop within him, confessing it was a feeling he had never experienced before. Junwoo continued with a powerful emotional voice that when she took his hand and smiled, that was their first moment of separation. With deep pain, Junwoo expressed his utter helplessness. I couldn't do anything, absolutely nothing. Then he suddenly stood up, leaving the chair, and continued, We live in two completely different worlds. He knelt, speaking of the suffering he had endured, of the decisions he was forced to make. She would never understand. Then he shouted in intense emotion, She was everything to me, so why did she say those things? Backstage, the assistant turned to Director Do in amazement, asking where he had found such a monster, referring to Junwoo's talent. Director Do just silently watched everything. He knew well that although Junwoo had no theatrical breathing or pronunciation techniques, the entire auditorium was captivated by his performance. The director silently thought that Junwoo wasn't merely reciting lines. He was truly living in the character. He also realized that Junwoo's lines changed slightly each time, gradually becoming deeper as his emotions intensified, and he was portraying the character so vividly that if the character were real, he would speak exactly like that. Everyone in the theater stared in amazement, wondering if he was really just acting because the performance was unbelievably real. At that moment, the actress playing Eli stepped onto the stage. Junwoo saw her and rushed over, calling her name in a worried voice. Eli! He quickly took her hand and pleaded desperately, begging her not to leave. Junwoo looked deeply into her eyes with endless sorrow as she said to him, There's something I never told you. The reason why I couldn't respond to you that day. And at that crucial moment, the actress suddenly realized she couldn't remember her next line. She stood frozen, flustered, trying to recall the line, but could only utter disjointed, fragmented words. Backstage, Director Do immediately realized what was happening and exclaimed worriedly, She forgot her line. He told himself that this sometimes happened with inexperienced stage actors because on a real stage there was no chance to retake a scene like in movies. Director Do wished she could skip the forgotten line and continue acting naturally without faltering. At that moment, Junwoo whispered to the girl, telling her not to continue. He quickly realized the awkward situation they were in and began to improvise. With a choked, emotional voice, You don't need to say anything more. I already know. His eyes welled up, his voice beginning to tremble gently. He repeated in deep pain, So. Junwoo then embraced the actress on stage and continued in a choked, pained voice, So now. The curtain slowly closed, hiding the emotional scene Junwoo had just delivered while the entire auditorium was still immersed in an emotional silence. The audience sat quietly, their eyes fixed on the stage, still mesmerized by the scene they had just witnessed. Then suddenly, the theater erupted in thunderous, enthusiastic applause, marking the success of the scene and the audience's full acceptance of Junwoo's performance. Backstage, Junwoo stood with the other actors, stunned and silent, listening to the roaring applause from the auditorium. Junwoo and the actress walked off stage feeling immensely relieved that the scene had concluded smoothly. Director Do laughed incredulously as he witnessed everything from behind. He was still amazed that such an excellent performance had been prepared in just 12 hours. He recalled that actors usually needed 2 weeks to analyze a character and understand the script, not to mention memorizing lines and coordinating stage movements with props. He was utterly stunned, remembering that Junwoo had not only memorized the script in record time, but had also skillfully covered up the supporting actress's mistake right on stage. This moment further affirmed the special talent this teenager possessed. Meanwhile, the backstage crew was discussing in amazement the incredibly enthusiastic audience reaction after Act 1 ended. They couldn't understand how a 17-year-old boy could deliver such an outstanding and emotional performance in such a short time. The director turned to them and asked if they truly realized what Junwoo had done, that he had completely changed the concept of the stage, the arrangement of chairs, movement patterns, lighting, and even color schemes. Hearing this, the assistant suddenly exclaimed that he hadn't realized it until that moment. The entire backstage crew was stunned, and the assistant asked Director Do if he truly understood all the techniques Junwoo had explained. Director Do honestly replied that he didn't understand most of it, but he felt he had no choice but to trust him. After a short pause, the director smiled faintly and confirmed one thing with absolute certainty. That kid standing over there is more talented than anyone else here. Junwoo sat in the dressing room, his heart filled with a strange emotion he couldn't name. Then he suddenly realized this wasn't the first time he had performed on stage. Vague memories of his past life surfaced. He had been a professional con artist, always wearing many masks, playing various roles to deceive people. Back then, he had never denied his acting ability. On the contrary, he knew exactly how good he was. He used to get into character smoothly, transforming into completely different people without a single flaw, and with that talent he had deceived and manipulated many in his previous life. However, this time everything was completely different. For the first time, he was directly facing the audience's gaze. These weren't ordinary looks. Each gaze was filled with emotion, lingering tears, and a strangely deep empathy. In the climactic moment, he felt as if both he and everyone in the auditorium had been transported to another world, an unreal place that yet felt more real than ever. In just a few short seconds, Junwoo realized that this second life of his was truly so unfamiliar and strange. In his previous life, he had chosen death. He had even given up his name, believing that by doing so, he could live on without facing his past. But now, under the stage lights shining down on him, he silently asked himself deep in his heart, "Can I do this seriously?" Immediately after the first act ended, an excited Director Do rushed towards the dressing room, emotionally calling Junwoo's name loudly. He ignored the actress who had just entered, apologizing for her mistake, saying she had suddenly gotten nervous. Placing a hand on Junwoo's shoulder, the director said, half joking, half serious, in an emotional voice, "This cunning kid pretending not to care at all, turns out he was hiding such tremendous talent." Then he continued teasing, "It's time for you to go back on stage. Want to review the script?" Junwoo replied in a tired but calm voice, saying he felt a bit overwhelmed. Director Do tried to hide his joy and surprise, adding, "So after all those complaints about the script, you finally took a real role, huh?" Junwoo replied in a low, sad voice. "I just don't want to be trapped between the lines anymore." Director Do looked at him surprised, as if he didn't understand, then curiously asked, "What does that sentence mean? Is this another one of those thoughts only you understand?" At that moment, Director Do suddenly reflected, feeling surprised. He remembered hearing similar words somewhere before. A veteran actor once said that true preparation is keeping the character in your heart, and if you stare at the script for too long, you'll unknowingly be bound by it. He also remembered a seasoned actress saying that if an actor can truly feel the character's emotions, the lines will flow naturally. That's why she always tried to avoid reading the script too much when filming. Director Do smiled inwardly as he recalled that he had once thought those words were a bit hollow, but now thinking back, they were the culmination of over 20 years of experience in the acting profession. It was truly unbelievable that those profound words had just been uttered by a young man standing on stage for the first time, having just completed his first scene ever. But clearly every word Junwoo spoke carried an astonishing depth that couldn't be dismissed, even though he was still vague about many basic theatrical terms. After a quick thought, Director Do suddenly realized Junwoo had surpassed himself a professional director in terms of artistic sensibility. That realization left him both bewildered and unsure how to treat the boy from now on. Suddenly, a crew member entered and loudly announced, "Act 2 is about to begin. Everyone get ready." Junwoo stood up and walked towards the wings. Before leaving, he turned back to look at Director Do and said softly, "Excuse me, I'll go ahead." He gave a gentle, calm smile and added, "I'll be back soon." Junwoo returned to the stage, and once again he performed the remainder of the play with an astonishing brilliance that stunned everyone. When the performance concluded, Junwoo and the entire cast stood before the audience, who had all risen to their feet, applauding incessantly, expressing their fervent admiration for the outstanding performance. In that crowd, one person stood tall and confident, finally feeling that he had found what he had been searching for his entire life. The next morning, after the performance, Junwoo sat alone in the rehearsal room, intently reading play scripts and books about theater, completely immersed in the world of words. While engrossed, he heard a voice, "Are you planning to spend your whole life just glued to those books?" Junwoo turned and saw Director Do entering the room with a worried look. "Where have you been hiding all morning, huh?" Director Do placed a box full of books in front of Junwoo and then asked, "Is this enough for now?" Junwoo stared at the pile of books the director had just brought, unable to hide his surprise. Director Do gently encouraged him, saying that these books might not be very interesting, but they would certainly be very useful. He also added that he guessed Junwoo must have been feeling bored lately. At that moment, Junwoo suddenly remembered that in this small, remote town, there was only one library, the Jasmine Library, and it was quite far from the theater. He understood that the director had to travel all the way to that distant place in bad weather just because of a casual remark he had made the day before. This filled his heart with an indescribable emotion. Mansik stood nearby, observing Junwoo. The boy was sitting on the floor, his eyes glued to the lines as if devouring every word. Seeing this, Mansik silently broke into a sweat, wondering if this kid really needed all this dry theory. He continued to think, or is giving him this pile of theory no different from suppressing his extraordinary instincts? Despite his hesitation, Mansik also comforted himself. "But this is all I can do for the kids." Junwoo smiled faintly, still engrossed in reading. "This is fun." Standing nearby, Mansik asked again, "So did it at least help a little?" Junwoo, still not looking up from the book, replied, "It's the first time I've studied so seriously, and I find it quite interesting." Mansik wiped the sweat from his brow, repeating, "Fun, huh?" Then he asked seriously, "Are you sure this is the first time you've studied these things?" Junwoo looked up, his eyes lighting up as if he had realized something. "It's not just actors who know how to act." Mansik frowned. "What do you mean?" From the floor, Junwoo gently advised, "Be careful. People like you out there are easy targets." Still reading, Junwoo added, "You just rush into everything without thinking." Mansik hesitated. "People like me." He put a hand to his neck as if in self-defense. Mansik retorted, "When did I ever do that?" Meanwhile, Junwoo calmly continued reading, making Mansik think, "What does a tiny kid like you know?" At that moment, Junwoo looked up, his blue eyes sharp. "You're doing it with me right now." Mansik looked serious as Junwoo implied he was acting rashly without knowing anything about the other person. Junwoo sat silently lost in thought. A moment of silence passed between them. Mansik now appearing only from behind, still holding a book, Junwoo suddenly asked, "Do you want me to become famous?" Mansik replied thoughtfully, "Not necessarily." Standing amidst the bookshelves in the archive area, Mansik elaborated, "Actually, I just hope you get to live true to what you really want." Looking at Junwoo, Mansik admitted, "You might think I'm using you." The poster for the play 8 Angry Men appeared behind him as Mansik continued, "Even if you ruined the performance, I would still have gone to the bookstore today." Junwoo smirked as if he already knew that. "Possibly, but if I thought you were using me, I would have demanded money from the theater long ago." Holding the book in his hand, Junwoo said seriously, "Anyway, thank you for these books. I really need them." Mansik was slightly surprised. Really? Jun-woo, without looking up, replied concisely, really. A close-up of Jun-woo's determined lips. His thoughts echoed, I will definitely repay you later. The sun was setting. A voice came from outside the theater. Hello, Director Do. A bead of sweat rolled down as Man-sik's eyes widened in astonishment. The visitor continued. So you're the one running this theater? Man-sik screamed internally. This person is... He was confused, wondering why that person was here. Meanwhile, the man stood in front of the theater gate. The frame inserted a large headquarters building with a flag flying on its roof. The visitor repeated, Hello, Director Do Man-sik. I heard you're running this theater. Man-sik continued to think, why him? Why is he here? That man was Choi Ji-mong, the director of NK, a name even outsiders to the industry knew. He was the one who had the power to cast actors for major film projects, and almost all of them were successful. Man-sik, slightly flustered, asked, yes, but what brings you here? Choi Ji-mong just smiled gently and replied, I really enjoyed yesterday's performance. Then Choi Ji-mong began to ask about the boy from yesterday, while Man-sik stood still, sweat starting to bead on his forehead from nervousness. When asked if Jun-woo was a member of the theater troupe, Man-sik nodded in confirmation, then quickly corrected himself, saying that although the boy wasn't an official member, he was indeed working there. Standing in front of the theater door, Choi Ji-mong said seriously that he wanted to make an offer, then bowed his head slightly, apologizing for coming so suddenly, and confessing this was the first time he had acted so impulsively. A faint smile appeared on Choi Ji-mong's face as he said, It's been a long time since I've felt this way, as if referring to something very special. A flashback showed Jun-woo standing on stage, the spotlight shining down on him like a bright star. In that frame, Choi Ji-mong's monologue echoed, It feels like finding a precious gem that was buried. Man-sik asked directly, What role are you planning to cast Jun-woo in? Choi Ji-mong gestured with his hand, explaining, It's not just simply casting. Choi Ji-mong began to explain that they were having difficulty finding a suitable child actor for an upcoming project because even talented child actors mostly played bright roles. Man-sik listened intently as Choi Ji-mong continued, Child actors usually find it very difficult to portray maturity, but Jun-woo can naturally convey the life of a 30-year-old man without any awkwardness. The man in the baseball cap from earlier, now revealed to be Choi Ji-mong, firmly asserted that Jun-woo even surpassed that level of performance. Choi Ji-mong, now looking extremely impressed, whispered, Really? As if unable to believe the boy's ability. Standing with Man-sik in front of the theater next to the poster for 8 Angry Men, Choi Ji-mong thought, such talent hidden in a place like this. Man-sik's face became serious as he said, Jun-woo's ability isn't just merely excellent. Then he asked Choi Ji-mong if he had any specific plans for the boy. Choi Ji-mong, slightly surprised, repeated the question with a probing look. Plans? Man-sik gestured with his hand, saying he already knew NK's professional scale, and was asking if Choi Ji-mong intended to provide formal training, involve the boy in major domestic and international projects. Man-sik continued to list opportunities like attending international events, then added, Of course, if the boy wants it. Interspersed were images of professional training programs. Choi Ji-mong, sweating lightly, asked in surprise, You want me to invest such significant opportunities free of charge in a young, inexperienced rookie? Man-sik calmly countered, I think you know well after watching the performance. That's why you're standing here waiting with such eagerness. Choi Ji-mong remained silent, thinking, hand on his chin. Choi Ji-mong smiled faintly and replied, I understand. I'll do my best to support him, but, he added, this isn't something I can decide alone. Man-sik thought, looking at him still hesitating, he probably still doesn't fully understand the kid's true potential. Then he thought further. What you've seen is only half of it. A close-up of Man-Sik's determined eyes behind his glasses showed his firm belief in Jun-woo. Choi Ji-mong presented NK Entertainment's business card and explained that they just wanted to create a suitable environment to develop the boy's talent. He handed the card to Man-Sik and added, "I hope you will consider the quickest and most convenient path for the boy, as I know you care a lot about him." Before leaving, Choi Ji-mong advised Man-Sik to think carefully and report his decision. The sunset descended behind the man's silently departing figure. At the theater afterwards, Jun-woo lay sprawled on the wooden floor surrounded by scattered books. Sunlight streamed gently through the window. As he lay there, he mumbled, "What should I do now?" His mind was worried about not having enough money. He continued to think. Anyway, teacher Man-Sik isn't the type to chase after money. While he was pondering, the sound of the door opening unexpectedly caught his attention. On the wall, the poster of 8 angry men still hung. Man-Sik peeked in silently, looking at Jun-woo, then thought, "I can tell the kid's starting to get bored." Still lying on the floor, Jun-woo looked up as Man-Sik cleared his throat gently to announce his presence. Stepping inside, Man-Sik asked, "I came to see if you're okay. But why aren't you asking anything? You have a good teacher by your side, yet you're this quiet." Through his glasses, Man-Sik seemed to be wondering why Jun-woo had no questions when he clearly had an opportunity to learn. Jun-woo, now holding a book, was about to ask, "But..." Man-Sik looked at the book and said, "So you do have something you want to know, huh?" Pointing to a marked page, Jun-woo said, "I see this part is already translated, but reading the example I feel the meaning is a bit different." Man-Sik sat down opposite Jun-woo, confidently saying, "All right, let me take a look. I may only have 5 years of experience, but I've studied 10 years worth of knowledge." Jun-woo pointed to a passage in the script and said, "This is my part." Man-Sik whispered to himself, "Could it be that the moment I can finally help him has arrived?" A close-up of Man-Sik's eyes as he exclaimed in surprise, "Huh?" Staring at the script page with a puzzled expression, Man-Sik mumbled, What language is this? I've studied classical literature, but it was all translations. I've never seen this form." His face grew increasingly tense as he tried to explain, well, this is..." Then he suddenly jumped up from his seat. Jun-woo looked up slightly surprised by his teacher's abrupt action. Then Man-Sik clutched his stomach, ran off, and said, "Oh no, my stomach hurts so much, you just keep looking okay," leaving Jun-woo alone in the room full of posters of Muttering Man and 8 Angry Men. Standing alone in the hallway, Man-Sik looked extremely disappointed and dejected after what had just happened. A close-up of his eyes showed his thoughts. How much more are you going to surprise me, even though it was the result he had hoped for? Man-Sik still felt anxious, because Jun-woo's rapid development had surpassed his ability to guide him. He admitted to himself, "Even though I've experienced many failures, this is the first time I've felt truly helpless." His eyes were heavy with worry as he wondered, "With my limited abilities, how much further can I guide this boy?" Man-Sik looked closely at the passage Jun-woo had pointed to, while a bead of sweat gently rolled down his temple. A wave of relief spread through Man-Sik as he recognized the familiar text, thinking, luckily I know this part." Soon after, Man-Sik began to explain Brecht's theory of the fourth wall, saying it was a concept referring to the imaginary wall separating the audience and the stage. Man-Sik continued to explain that in Brecht's plays, actors would sometimes break the fourth wall to communicate directly with the audience. He added, as Jun-woo listened intently, that this technique helped connect the play to social messages, transcending the boundaries of mere entertainment. Jun-woo nodded, showing he understood, then pointed to another passage in the book to show that he also grasped that part. Standing in the hallway, Jun-woo said that this next part wasn't too difficult to understand. The scene shifts to a clear blue sky with fluffy white clouds, then gradually moves inside Man-Sik's office. A moment later, Man-Sik was engrossed in studying at his desk, completely absorbed in books. Around him were towering stacks of books. One of them suddenly fell to the floor with a soft thud. A close-up showed him holding a book titled Understanding Dramatic Theater. Mansik sat pensively, his gaze distant, musing on the irony of returning to study theatrical theories at his age. Leaning over the desk, he diligently took notes, wondering if he had ever been this passionate about studying since entering the theater world. However, a hint of anxiety on his face showed that this passion for learning didn't last long. With innate talent fueled by love and passion, the boy's pace of progress far exceeded any imaginable limit. By now, he no longer needed theory books, as his abilities had surpassed even seasoned professionals in the field. When all the staff had left, Junwoo carefully rearranged the empty stage and then perfectly reenacted scenes. He mastered the emotions and habits of each character as well as their movements. The lighting angles changed according to the mood of each scene, truly entering the realm of art. During practice, he retained only the core emotions from the script and then rewrote all the remaining dialogue himself. Indeed, this was no longer mere practice. He alone was filling the stage, immersing himself in the experience of performing. Clutching K Entertainment's business card in his hand, Mansik came to a conclusion. This choice will probably be better. Over the phone, a voice said, "This is Choi Ji-mong." Mansik replied, "This is Du Mansik." The scene opens on a sunny day, showing a restaurant with a sign, Gaigan Bit Tang, beef rib soup, situated among modern buildings. Across the table, Mansik, arms crossed, observed Junwoo eating, nodding slightly. With a thoughtful expression. Mansik looked troubled, wondering what on earth should I do now. In an empty theater over a phone call, the person on the other end said he had made the right decision and promised to meet all conditions, even suggesting that if the boy wanted anything else, it could be negotiated. Mansik wondered if they were really willing to concede that much. Still on the phone, Mansik replied that he would discuss it with Junwoo later, while the other person affirmed that they were generous enough to agree to everything. That person asked if Junwoo was free tomorrow, as they wanted to see him perform with their script during a visit, surprising Mansik, who exclaimed, "Perform right away!" in the office. Choi Ji-mong reassured Mansik that there was no pressure. It was just for the boy to get acquainted with the company and see if their training style suited him. With a confident look, Choi Ji-mong said that with such generous conditions, the contract was almost certain. No new actor could refuse that initial offer. However, Mansik broke into a cold sweat, still skeptical that Junwoo would agree so easily based on what he had shown so far. Mansik looked worried, wondering how to persuade this stubborn boy. Junwoo casually said he'd rather read other scripts than waste time going to Seoul, and that Mansik didn't even need to watch the performance to know how it would be. Back at the dining table, Mansik asked why Junwoo wasn't eating and offered to eat the rest for him, while also encouraging him to eat, even considering ordering another dish. Junwoo just coldly replied, "No need." This made Mansik ask, "What have you been doing all this time? Have you never been to Seoul?" Then he continued to ask if he had ever traveled. Mansik slammed the table, unable to hide his astonishment, exclaiming, "What, never traveled, not even once? Then why didn't you go when you had the chance?" A close-up of Mansik's eyes. A single tear silently appeared. He thought, No, this isn't right. I almost lost my way." After regaining his composure, Mansik cleared his throat and asked Junwoo, "Have you ever heard of the Yuksam building?" Then he explained that it was in Seoul, and if he saw it with his own eyes, it would surely amaze him. While Junwoo continued eating, Mansik began to describe the building with great enthusiasm, his eyes bright, counting on his fingers. Mansik said that building had a whole 63 floors. Junwoo calmly took another spoonful of soup and replied nonchalantly, "Is that so impressive?" An overhead shot showed the two sitting at a table in a sparsely occupied restaurant. Silence enveloped the space after Junwoo's brief reply. After a slight cough, Mansik said that he had to go to Seoul tomorrow and casually invited Junwoo to go with him if he felt bored. He continued to say that Seoul was completely different from this countryside, mentioning Myeongdong and giant buildings trying to pique his curiosity. Mansik, full of excitement, described the Han River, saying it couldn't be compared to the small streams in their hometown. Junwoo continued eating, showing little reaction to Mansik's descriptions. A bead of sweat gently rolled down Mansik's forehead as he finished speaking. "I'm just saying." Junwoo suddenly looked up and asked directly, "Do you want to get rid of me that badly?" This startled Mansik, who stammered a denial, explaining he just wanted him to see Seoul once. Looking down at something in his hand, Junwoo mumbled softly, "So disappointing." Then he asked Mansik, "Since when did you become so greedy?" Mansik's eyes widened in surprise, then he asked back, "What?" As the unspoken words below seemed to question him, he felt a pang of guilt, wondering, so he knows everything. A close-up of Mansik's wide, stunned eyes with a bead of sweat rolling down showed his shock at Junwoo's words. While Junwoo calmly continued eating, Mansik thought, "Did the kid eavesdrop on my phone call, or did he secretly contact Choi Ji-mong without me knowing?" He sighed wearily inwardly. "If I'd known this, I would have talked to him first." Then he wondered again, "Junwoo." Then he asked, "Are we really going to Seoul tomorrow?" This made Mansik ask in surprise, "Where are you planning to go?" Junwoo calmly replied, "If I say I'm going, then I'm definitely going." Mansik then asked, "Is there anywhere you want to go?" And Junwoo replied concisely, "Not really." This made Mansik wonder, does he really want to go with me? Mansik started to worry. I was just joking around a bit. Did he think I was taking him for professional training? Mansik hurriedly explained, "I'm not doing this to help you get better or anything." Junwoo calmly replied, "I know." Mansik continued, "About that company, you can't imagine how big it is." Junwoo listened intently as Mansik explained, "I don't know your circumstances, but maybe they can help you later." Mansik advised, "At least you should meet some people on your level." Then he added, "No matter how well you act, people will still see you as a rookie." He continued, "If you're lucky, your stage won't be ruined. Otherwise..." He shook his head and said quietly, "What do those kids know?" Junwoo maintained a calm expression and then asked, "So where is it?" Mansik wondered loudly, "If I tell you, would you even know it's called NK Entertainment?" Then he said softly, "Someone there will recognize your value." Junwoo just replied, "Yes, okay." In Mansik's mind, suspicion began to creep in. Why is the kid being unusually obedient, or did he mess up the stage somehow? At the restaurant, Mansik spoke up. "Are we really going?" But Junwoo said nothing. The NK Entertainment building appeared majestic against the clear blue sky, leaving Mansik stunned and full of admiration. Inside, Mansik excitedly recognized the film set he had seen on TV, his eyes lighting up at the sight of brand new equipment. Junwoo calmly observed as Mansik exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, this is..." then pressed his face against the glass window. Mansik asked Junwoo, "What's wrong with you?" "I'm not from the countryside." Then he asked, flustered, "Or are you thinking I'm overreacting?" Junwoo calmly said, "I didn't say that." An employee was standing near them. The employee announced, "We've arrived." Then pointing to a room, "Please wait here, sir." Though a bit tense, Mansik resolutely said, "All right, let's go see." While Junwoo silently watched, Mansik's hand reached for the doorknob, his mouth uttering a soft, Mansik quickly corrected himself. "I was just going to open the door for you." Hand still firmly on the doorknob, his eyes full of hope. Mansik gently encouraged, "Do well inside, okay?" Junwoo calmly replied, "Yes." As Junwoo entered the meeting room, a friendly voice greeted, "Welcome, student." His azure eyes scanned the room. In front of him were two men sitting around a large table. One spoke, We've been waiting for you." The man in the suit, Choi Ji-mong, gestured towards an empty chair, inviting, "Please sit here." Junwoo immediately recognized the man as Choi Ji-mong from NK Entertainment. His gaze shifted to the other man sitting beside him. The second man was Junho, NK Entertainment's top actor. Choi Ji-mong repeated, "We've been really looking forward to you, student." Then pointing to the chair, "First, please sit down." Junwoo approached the table, pulled out a chair, and prepared to sit down. His blue eyes sparkled with determination, showing his readiness for this meeting. That man was Junho, the face of NK Entertainment. To be precise, at that time, he wasn't exactly a top-tier actor yet, but anyone who loved movies knew him. Even though he was just a stable supporting actor back then, normally someone like him wouldn't appear in a meeting like this. This indicated Choi Ji-mong had intentionally brought him. Junwoo thought to himself, a young Junho, so fresh. Junho immediately asked directly, "What's your name?" Junwoo shook his head slightly and replied, "I don't have a name yet. I plan to choose one now." In Choi Ji-mong's mind, he mumbled, "No name yet. Could it be? He's already thought of a stage name." Observing Junwoo's calm demeanor, Choi Ji-mong began to suspect. He doesn't seem nervous at all. Or maybe he doesn't know who I am. He continued to reason. Well, it's possible if he lived in that place. Then an image of Mansick muttering appeared in his mind. Choi Ji-mong decided to begin. "Well, let's just get to know each other slowly. I watched your performance. It was very impressive." He continued to ask, "When did you start acting?" Junwoo replied, "Since the performance was 2 weeks ago, it must have been 2 weeks." Junho interjected, "I also saw that performance, but I'm asking when you started acting." Junwoo confirmed, "Yes, that was my first time." Choi Ji-mong's face showed clear astonishment. In his head, it echoed, "What did he just say?" A bead of sweat rolled down Choi Ji-mong's forehead as he doubted, "Only 2 weeks. Is that true?" Choi Ji-mong placed a script titled Miracle, Episode 1 on the table, explaining, "Currently, our company is planning a movie." He presented the script, his eyes glancing over the words on the cover, then said softly, "Miracle change." A flashback showed a high school student standing next to a middle-aged man. Junwoo, startled, exclaimed, "I remember this scene in my past life. I saw a story about a high school student and a teacher swapping bodies." Choi Ji-mong stared at Junwoo from across the meeting table, a faint smile on his face. With an eager expression, Choi Ji-mong suggested, "Before we discuss further, I'd like to see you act. Just a short segment will do." Junwoo silently looked down at the Miracle script in his hand, his expression unreadable. Junwoo silently observed the closed curtains of the meeting room door from the outside. Meanwhile, Mansick pressed his ear to the door, his expression frustrated at not being able to hear anything from inside. Inside the room, Choi Ji-mong, a bead of sweat on his forehead, instructed Junwoo, who was sitting next to Junho, "Start reading from page 34. A close-up showed Junho's eyes holding a surprisingly deep thought. Junho thought, "The young actors I've met recently usually cling to me, begging me to watch them act constantly, saying they admire me." Junho continued to think, "With Ji-mong's personality as I know it, someone like that would have been kicked out of the industry long ago." As Junwoo looked down at the script, Junho stared at him. Just how good is he? Page 34 of the script. Scene 14. A bustling school hallway. The character Tae-kyung, possessed by Yi Shik's soul, is in extreme panic. Where am I? Why does my voice sound like this? An illustration in the script showed a sunlit hallway with students bustling by. Junwoo began to immerse himself in the role. Junho embodying the panicked character, his eyes darted quickly across the crowded hallway. A Korean onomatopoeia appeared, expressing the character's confusion as he looked around. He clutched his throat, delivering the line, "Where am I?" The panic escalated as he screamed, "And my voice? What's happening? His face was filled with fear. Choi Ji-mong smiled encouragingly, turning to Jun-woo. See, it's not that hard. Want to try? Jun-woo, holding the script, remained silent. Only a speech bubble indicated his silence. He still sat at the table, clutching the script, maintaining his composure. The bright office space surrounded him, light shining on his face through the glass window. Jun-woo placed the script on the table and said decisively, "I can't act here." Choi Ji-mong and Jun-ho, sitting opposite, looked at each other. Jun-ho asked, "Why is there a problem?" Jun-woo placed his hand on the closed script and explained, "I can't read the lines like this." Choi Ji-mong's brow furrowed slightly, though he still tried to maintain a smile. "You mean the space here makes it difficult for you to act?" Choi Ji-mong mumbled, "Many people practice in quiet spaces to get into character." But Jun-woo gently yet firmly interrupted. "It's not a problem of getting into character. It's the lines." He began to describe his mind, conjuring the sound of skateboards hitting the floor and students' laughter. He continued, the wind blowing through the window, the noise of students playing all mixed into a lively space. Jun-woo concluded, "It's precisely those sounds mixed into the lines that are missing here." A bead of sweat rolled down Choi Ji-mong's forehead. He asked again, "What's the difference if the lines are mixed with noise?" Jun-ho was silent for a moment, his eyes slightly narrowed. Suddenly, he leaned forward, his face showing clear determination. Jun-ho reached across the table and took the script from Jun-woo's hand, making Choi Ji-mong exclaim, "Jun-ho!" Choi Ji-mong, startled, asked Jun-ho, "What's wrong? What are you thinking?" A close-up of Jun-ho's eyes glinted with a flash of intense realization. In Choi Ji-mong's mind, a thought arose. I've never seen him like this before. Outside Mansik was asking Choi Ji-mong about basic training, domestic and international projects, and even opportunities to study abroad. Of course, if Jun-woo wants to. In the meeting room, Choi Ji-mong and Jun-ho looked directly at Jun-woo. Choi Ji-mong confessed, "I'm not sure what all that means, but just give it a try. Consider it a read-through." Even if the conditions weren't ideal. Jun-woo's brilliant blue eyes widened slightly. The word audition floated above his head. Jun-woo suddenly understood. "So this is an audition. I thought I was invited to do a commercial." He hesitated. "You mean I sit here and audition right here?" Jun-woo continued, his voice slow. "But that scene needs a scene partner." Yay. A flashback showed Jun-ho with the caption introducing him as the lead actor in 20 is less than 30 is more than. Jun-woo's tear-streaked face from an old scene appeared with the thought, "Don't tell me that person is you, Jun-ho." Jun-ho smiled faintly, turning his head towards the sunset. "Trying a little each day to live more happily." Jun-woo blurted out, "Do you have another script?" This made Choi Ji-mong curiously ask back, "What do you need another script for?" He explained that he believed it would be better if they coordinated their schedules, referring to Jun-ho. Jun-ho looked slightly surprised at Jun-woo's direct suggestion to act together. Jun-woo continued to explain that he thought it would be better if they worked together instead of him acting alone. Choi Ji-mong smiled faintly, thinking to himself, "Look at this kid." He wondered if Jun-woo's recklessness was due to his youth, noticing he was indeed courageous. While Choi Ji-mong awkwardly suggested it might be difficult, Jun-ho interjected, "Let's do it. Let's try collaborating." Jun-ho asked director Choi Ji-mong if there was another script, making Choi Ji-mong exclaim in surprise, "What is it?" Choi Ji-mong, inwardly stunned, wondered if Jun-ho really intended to do a dialogue with this child on the spot. A close-up of Jun-ho's eyes, a bead of sweat on his forehead along with Choi Ji-mong's confused thought, "I don't understand what he sees." Jun-woo maintained a calm, almost emotionless expression, observing the unfolding events. Meanwhile, Jun-ho looked annoyed. "Damn it, what's going on?" He waved his hand impatiently. Don't just stand there, do something, while Choi Ji-mong watched from the side table, arms crossed, silently praising Junho is truly Junho. Just by changing his voice, he can portray a 40-year-old man. A close-up of Junho's eyes thinking, this is for the teacher. Junho in character snapped back, I'm angry too, you bastard. Junho, still acting, lamented, at least you're still young. What about me? He asked about Junho's costume. What are you wearing? Your taste is quite unique. This annoyed Junho, who retorted, Taste, is this the time to talk about taste? Junho's eyes sharpened as he asked, Do you understand the situation? Junho thought to himself. At first I thought I was imagining it because it was too subtle, but in the kid's answering voice there was a hint of the middle schooler I was portraying. Does he understand the character and how I'm acting to change so immediately after just 2 lines? In character, Junho protested. Why are you complaining to me? It's not my fault. Junho immediately replied. So it's my fault. Junho, embodying the strict teacher, warned. Anyway, don't do anything reckless with my body. Stay still. Junho carefully observed Junho's performance, noticing the slightly trembling fingers, a detail that impressed him. He analyzed Junho's expression, seeing anxiety mixed with firmness, his awareness of his surroundings, and how he cut off the last sentence in case someone overheard. Junho also noticed the subtle movements, angle of gaze, and the slight blinking of his eyes with each line, tears welling up. Junho exclaimed, So what are you going to do? Inwardly surprised. How can he control me like this with just a script without any prior preparation? I have to restrain myself. Junho, fully embodying the confused student, clutched his head and shouted, You're the teacher, you should know I'm serious. I don't know either. This is driving me crazy. A close-up of Junho's face, thinking, It's still different anyway. The shot showed him as the student reacting with anxiety, touching his head, then his collar, while Junho watched intently. Junho stood pensively, a bead of sweat on his forehead, deeply affected by Junho's performance. He silently realized that if Junho had truly wanted to stand out, his own performance would have been completely overshadowed. Junho, holding the script, confirmed that what he had said earlier about the missing sound wasn't just for fun. Junho told Junho he would give a signal right away and hoped he would come back, making Junho think about the boy's past and experiences. Junho declared he would stop the scene there. Junho and Junho stood opposite each other in the meeting room after the unexpected performance. Junho remarked that acting together was completely different from acting alone on stage, adding that it was very enjoyable and thanking Junho. Junho was surprised by the thanks, silent for a moment to process his emotions. A bead of sweat fell. Junho thought to himself that he should have been the one to thank him. He thought about truly working with a young talent like Junho.